thank you so much for joining us today. What we do is we interview women, usually in the media and advertising industry. And we're doing a season of our podcast that's creator focused because we have such a badass group of women who are coming up through the ranks with their voices on the mic as podcast hosts. And so this is really all about you, your thoughts on the industry, how you got started. Obviously, you know, working at Audiochuck, what that's like.
Yeah.
And that being a totally female owned and run business.
Yeah. It's so cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we'll do. So
Sweet.
Very casual, all about you.
That's like more pressure. I like when interviews are all about other people.
Which is what you're used to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I've been doing.
And so, yeah, let's just get started. If you want to introduce yourself, your podcast,
Cool.
Any other titles you want to throw on there?
Yeah. So my name is Delia D'Ambra Wheeler, but I go by Delia D'Ambra on the mic. I've been a journalist now for going on 10 years. And I currently am a creator and host and executive producer for Audiochuck, and the shows that I do are CounterClock, Park Predators, and Dark Arenas. And, you know, all of us over at Audiochuck, we're always after the same things, trying to advocate for the same sort of changes in the criminal justice system. And so I've worked on Crime Junkie, I've worked on The Deck, I've worked on, you know, a lot of other things in their portfolio. And it's been a really, really cool journey, having done this now full time. So about 4 years full-time podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it's crazy to see how it's just emerged, and I'm so glad to be a part of it.
Wow, so you've only been in podcasting for like 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, full-time. So I think I created CounterClock in late 2018, and then it really, went kind of mainstream when I joined the Audiochuck family in 2020. So that's like, and when I first created it, I was still working as a TV news reporter. So doing that full time and doing podcasting, but really going all in was about 3.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So, which is really weird, to think about, because there's now going on 6 seasons of CounterClock, 5 seasons of Park Predators, 1 season of Dark Arena. So it's just so much has happened in that time frame, which is a really, really cool thing for the stories that we get to tell.
Mm-hmm. I work on the marketing team, and every time we market one of your podcasts, it's always you do so much. That's
yeah,
awesome.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Talk to me about the differences. You mentioned that you were a TV on TV, and now you're audio based. So talk to me about like the differences there.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like a lot of similarities, especially as an investigative journalist, right? Like, so you're doing that, and that's how your mind sort of works and approaches stories and figure out, what's the story, particularly in the crime space. But there's definitely differences, and the biggest one is the length of time that you have to deliver content. And so when I was a TV news reporter, I was covering multiple stories a day, all important stories, but just the turnaround was so, the cadence was just so different. And so being in, audio, being in podcasting, and letting stories have the time to breathe, letting interviews have the time to like tell their story in the length of time that they need to tell it. Mm-hmm. Interviewees, building that trust relationship. When I was in TV news, you kind of had to do that in a 24-hour period, or it was a new story. You turn, it was different. You had to move on. But now, I develop trust relationships with sources over periods of months and years. And so that's really, I think the big difference is just sort of the medium itself. But yeah, it's some things kind of transcend that though, because you know how to edit, you know how to figure out like what's a good soundbite to use, where is the story arc at, what is the big takeaway people are going to have. So there are some things that are similar, but there are also some big differences.
It's interesting too when you mentioned length of content. I feel like there's this misconception that people like short content, and that's like we have short attention spans. We need to like hurry up and get their attention quick. But we've actually like done some studies, and like people, especially a younger generation, which is also interesting because they've always been, you're always like, oh, they have TikTok, they 15-second stuff, but they actually tend to like the really longer form podcast episodes.
Yeah, and I think it's just like the hooking of storytelling, and like people feeling like they see themselves, they understand, they have a relatable experience to the victim or the victim's family or something of that nature. So you then are more invested in that, right? With shorter content, I don't know if that is like as tangible, right? Like, because you're just like, oh, that's cool. Like they look like me, they sound like me or whatever. But then you just kind of move on. I think when you're actually like living people's lives with them across a long form, content piece, it just becomes more real. And I think I do really think that resonates a lot with people. Also, something that's interesting is like the listener base, I know for my shows is like ages like late teens all the way up to like people in their 60s and 70s, which is like a huge audience. That is so, to me, there's like nothing that would keep that many different types of people, genders, ages, unless they just genuinely like found something in the storytelling that was pulling them in. You know what I mean? Like, because that range is, there's a lot of different attention span and things that would be, attractive to those listeners. So I really do think it's the stories, it's the way they're delivered, and it's the way that the audience can engage in something even beyond the audio product. So they're going to, sign the petition. They're going to donate to the GoFundMe. They're going to do this, that, or the other. So I just think that that's something that's really real with the audience.
In the past couple years or so, we've seen more and more women come into the podcast space. I think at one point back when it first started, it was more of like a bro in the basement type of medium, and now it's really evolved to we've seen more people of color, more women, obviously. Like, why do you think that is?
I think it goes back to storytelling. And so when there are stories that are not in a space or they're not in a landscape, the only people that can really tell them and tell them authentically are the people who are representatives. So, when podcasting first was like really emerging, you're right. I think it was more of like, hey, me and my guy friend or so-and-so are going to get on the mic and talk about, the Lakers, or we're going to talk about like, whatever it is. And those things are still around and they're great. They've obviously been enhanced. But I think that there was a lot of things missing in the podcasting landscape, and it came down to really brave and, determined creators who said, what I'm experiencing, this, that, and the other about me is missing, and I want to bring that to the table. And so, Ashley Flowers is a great example of that with her show Crime Junkie. She's like, she always says like, it was something I wanted to listen to, but it wasn't around. So I just created it. Right. And I think it takes innovators like that to make it happen. And I think just more and more people are realizing that. And also too, like audio is, I wouldn't say it's easier, but audio is a place where if you're not a video person, I mean, the two can go hand in hand, but like to come out of like a visual space and like just kind of feel like you can, again, have more time. I think audio is a place for that. And it was something that I think drew a lot of people in. So I definitely think that's something that would probably account for what you mentioned.
Totally. This actually was like one of the first things that came up. I talked to Kylie yesterday, is that she thinks it's like, because it takes away like the visual expectations, I guess, like especially coming from TV where you're on video, like there is that element of of how you look and making sure you have makeup and you're done and you're ready. Sure. And like there's like this whole other layer, and like that layer is stripped away when it's just audio. You could be in your pajamas.
Well, and the subjects too. So like with my show and Kylie's as well, like we are they're very interview based, meaning other people are the majority of the audio. And it is, and I know this from being in TV, it is a lot more intimidating to shove a camera in someone's face. Even nowadays, if it's a smartphone or something smaller that's not some giant TV rig, that is like inherently, as a journalist, like that plays into what people are going to say, how they're going to say it, whether they're going to talk to you at all. So that when you remove that element and you introduce what is kind of the tried and true journalist, gear, is a recorder, an audio recorder. Everyone knows that that's usually present in an on-the-record interview, even for note-taking purposes. But now that it's for podcasting purposes, like it really does introduce this whole new element of you really are going to get to the real stuff, because there isn't that maybe intimidating presence that there would be in sort of that traditional visual format. So that's certainly an appealing thing. And I think that's why you see more, again, speaking as a journalist, that's why you've seen in the last couple of years, I think, more journalism giants, reporters, freelancers moving into the podcasting space, women, men, like, because they realize that like, hey, I've been doing this, but now I can do it and really like, not have to just like copy my notes and write a piece. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah. We've even experienced that with just this podcast. Like anytime we introduce video or like want to do like so many more people are like hesitant about it or like not sure. And when we say it's audio only, almost everyone says, like there's no it's, and and I do think like that helps you. People are more comfortable, I guess, and because of that, the interview changes.
The accessibility piece too. So like, especially when you think about like 2020 to now, you know, Zoom remote video isn't really that compelling. You can do Zoom remote audio and it still be really compelling. You know, I mean, it's not like can always be the cleanest. So like, there's that piece of it too, where it's kind of like, oh, it's on video, but it's over Zoom. Like, why aren't we just doing this with audio? You know what I mean? Like, so I definitely think there's something to that too.
Yeah. And obviously you're part of Audiochuck, and that's all female-owned run business. So just talk to me about your experience there. What's that like?
It's amazing. I mean, I think working with Ashley, I've known her now for several years. She's just as wonderful person as you could think, right? Like she has such a good vision. She's such an innovator, and to see her really pour into the people on the workforce, particularly women, young women who, you know, let's be honest, coming out of school as a journalist or coming out of school in marketing, you're not necessarily going to get the opportunities that you would want. And she's given those opportunities to so many people. And I think that's such an amazing thing. Culture is a huge, I think, driver of morale with people. And that's what you want. People that are working in very tender subject matter, such as true crime. They really need to love what they do, and to be surrounded by so many people who just love what they do every day is really, really cool. And I think that's why our work product has such engagement with the audiences and is such a front runner in the industry. And yeah, you know, working with also women too who are like crime junkies like you know what I mean? Like, they are interested in the same things as you. That's always great to be amongst company. And I can tell you that working in television news, and really, even in written journalism before, a newsroom environment is very different. You know, traditionally very male-driven, very cutthroat. I mean, there's just a lot of things that, you know, kind of went with that it was so refreshing to come into a space and have that so eliminated and everyone be so like-minded in the same direction and never feeling like the person next to you was a threat or that day or the next day, like just feeling like we are all after the same thing here. And that's really cool. And I think that translates to the product, which then is seen very authentic by the listener, or heard very authentic by the listener.
Yeah. I'm curious, why do you think women are so drawn to true crime? Because it is very, I think, female dominated.
Yeah. And usually my answer to that is, and I know this from working with so many families and women who've, it's surprising, but I think every season of CounterClock has been spearheaded by a woman related to the victim or case, which is pretty amazing. I do think women, like, we see ourselves in these victims in crimes. I mean, we know statistically women are victims of violent crime across the board, like more than others. So, you know, there is something to be said about wanting to listen to something where it's like, could this happen to me? Like, what can I learn? What can I teach my daughter? What can I teach my friend? And I don't think that that's dark. Like, I don't think that that's like a dark thing. I think that's a really smart and savvy thing. But also too, I think there's probably that little bit of a lot of women who, they have that inner detective. Like, our minds do think very, process oriented. If we're mothers, we're that way, you know, like, so I think that there's sort of kind of wanting to see kind of behind the veil of something, and women, I think, naturally are very good at that and good at getting answers. And I think that's probably one of the big draws of why true crime is so heavily, the listenership is so heavily, you know, female dominant.
Yeah. Going back to your first point, I used to bartend in my younger years, and they would do a training just for women bartending on how to leave the bar at the end of the night to make sure that you're safe, and like, you know, how to, like, if something happened, like what to do, or how to walk around the cars and things like that. And I still have some of that in me. Like, if you walk to a parking lot at night, I'm always aware, you know, like, and I forget what it was, but my husband said something the other day. He's like, why are you looking behind, you know, or whatever. And I'm just like, wow, like that, like, just that whole, there's like a whole world that he's not even privy to of like, just how, like, I am skeptical of everything just because that's what
Yeah,
you know?
sometimes you're just naturally a skeptical person, but I think as a woman, like there is that other, like you said, there's this whole world of like, I am not like constantly fearing for my safety, but I'm always aware of, of your surroundings. And I think, again, when you are telling stories about these kinds of cases, women are naturally going to go, hey, man, that sounded like a situation I was in once. Like, wow, like the reality hits, and it's sort of a reinforcing, like, yeah, I should be staying vigilant. I should be, this, that, or the other. And so I definitely think there's something to that.
Well, as we kind of wrap up, and in light of Pass the Mic, what would be your advice to a younger you or another female podcast creator who wants to enter the space? What would you say to them?
Yeah, definitely survey the landscape, especially now. Figure out what you're going to do and how it will be different, but also how it will be a success to you. Like, don't measure what you think your success is going to be against somebody else's or another woman or creator. Like, your success may be just to help the one family you work with, or to have the content that you know is going to go beyond what is on the mic. Like, it's going to have a lasting impact in a community. Like, to me, that's probably the biggest thing, is like, don't compare yourself to those around you. Like, really find a way to make yourself different, stand out, and be dedicated. Don't quit when things get hard. Don't quit when it doesn't work out to the plan you had typed up going into it. Be able to adapt, but be committed, because there's going to be the grind, but that grind is going to be for a reason. So
thank you for being with us here today. You're such an inspiration, and it was a pleasure to talk to you.